He called me his biggest failure in front of 200 people. So I handed him a box. Inside was everything he refused to see. The proof, the legacy, the truth. What he did next. It changed our family forever. My name is Elizabeth Carter. At 32, I became the youngest partner at Schmidt & Wallace Architecture. But tonight wasn't about architecture or accolades. It was about legacy. It was my father's retirement gala after 40 years at the helm of Carter Industries, and I sat alone at table 19. As my brothers, James and Thomas, flanked him on stage. I owe everything to my sons, he declared to 200 guests. My daughter never had what it takes for real business. As applause erupted, something shattered inside me. I rose, clutched a carefully wrapped box, my last gift to him, and walked away from a past that had always dismissed me. Growing up, being the only daughter of Richard Carter meant living in a perpetual shadow. My earliest memory of being dismissed. Age 8, Sunday dinner. My father discussed quarterly projections with my brothers. I asked a question about inventory turnover. He laughed. Elizabeth, help your mother with dessert. This is business talk. That moment defined the next 2 decades of my life. Richard Carter built Carter Industries from a $5,000 loan into a manufacturing empire. To the world, he was a Titina Cleveland boy turned CEO. To me, he was a symbol of traditional power, rigid, cold, unyielding. A man provides, a man builds, a man leaves a legacy. He repeated these phrases like gospel. My mother, Margaret, was his opposite. A former literature professor, she nurtured my creativity, praised my block towers and paper cities. Your father builds what functions, she whispered once, tracing her fingers along my sketch. You build what inspires. Her death from breast cancer when I was 16 left me unmoored. At her funeral, I overheard my father say to his brother, at least the boys can carry on the business, that's what matters. I pretended not to hear, but I did. Every word, even as my achievements surpassed my brother's valedictorian. MIT full ride, architecture awards he barely blinked. Drawing buildings isn't a real business, he scoffed when I got into MIT. Glorified art. 3 incidents etched themselves into my soul. Age 12, I won a state-level science fair. He missed it for Thomas's JV basketball game. MIT graduation, I gave the architecture school's address. He arrived late, left early. After my mother died, he said aloud that I didn't matter. Still, I forged my path. Refused the job offer at Carter Industries. Joined Schmidt & Wallace, climbed the ladder. Designed Lakefront Commons. Won the Hammond Award. Became the youngest partner. His response, lucky break. When the retirement gala invitation came, I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was the call from James. We're putting together a tribute video, he said. Send photos. Maybe something written. I did. Despite everything, I sent childhood pictures. A generous paragraph. Left out the pain. I found the answer to the perfect gift while sorting through my mother's safety deposit box. An envelope in her handwriting. For Elizabeth, when she needs reminding of her worth. Inside, childhood photos, press clippings. A letter of pride. I built a box of my own. My MIT diploma. My awards. My license. A USB titled What It Takes. Attached a card, from your biggest failure. The gala was opulence personified. Chandeliers, orchids, orchestras, Carter Industries banners like declarations of war. He greeted me with a backhanded compliment. Finally dressing professionally. At table 19, I watched my brothers at the head table. Saw myself in only one image during the video montage. A photo taken when I was 10, nothing more. Then he took the stage. I'm proud of my legacy. My sons, James and Thomas, he said. Unlike my daughter, who never had what it takes. A slow burn humiliation, gasps, pity glances. I stood, picked up the box, walked toward the stage. Elizabeth, he warned. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I said. Open it when I'm gone. And I left. Tears came only in the parking garage. Marcus was waiting at home. My boyfriend, a corporate psychologist, knew this moment would come. He just wrapped his arms around me. Let me fall apart. But that was only the beginning. Because when Richard Carter opened that box the next morning, everything changed. Everything. Marcus opened his arms. That bad. I collapsed into his embrace, allowing myself the comfort I had been denying for hours. In between sobs and stuttering breaths, I told him everything: how my father had humiliated me in front of 200 people, how I'd left him with the box, and what I'd packed inside. Everything I've saved for years, I whispered. Diplomas, awards, proof I earn more than James and Thomas combined. Press clippings. The letter from Mom, how proud she was of me. The video showing everything he refused to see. Marcus stroked my hair. And the card. Called me his biggest failure. I said, his words, not mine. He used those exact words with family. I wanted him to see what his failure has become. What do you hope happens now? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe he'll finally see me. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore, but deep down, I knew it did. Back at the gala, Richard Carter stood frozen at the podium, silver-wrapped package in hand. He unwrapped the box slowly. Guests remained silent as the microphone picked up each deliberate sound. He pulled out my MIT diploma, my architecture license, the Hammond Award medal. Then came the USB labeled "What It Takes," and finally, Mom's envelope in her handwriting. His hand trembled as he read her letter. At the bottom of the box was a note card. You built buildings with steel and concrete. I build them with vision and heart. Both require what it takes. I learned to be strong by being your daughter, Evan, when you couldn't see my worth. Goodbye, Dad. The room watched him absorb every item. Then he whispered into the mic. I believe we'll conclude the formal portion of the evening. James stepped up to save face. Thank you all for honoring my father. Please enjoy the dessert buffet. As music resumed and awkward conversation returned, Richard sat, quietly rereading Margaret's letter. What did she give you? Thomas asked. Everything I was too blind to see, Richard replied. A week later, I buried myself in work. Whispers followed me around the office, but no one dared bring it up. Dad left 7 voicemails. I hadn't listened to a single one. You should, Sophia urged, even if just for closure. I'm not ready, I said. Once I hear his voice, I'm back in that cycle. Then James appeared at my office. He's not himself, Liz. He hasn't left the house. Cancelled his golf trip, ignoring board calls. Not my problem, I replied. He watched your video. Dozens of times. Made us watch it too. You never asked about my work. I didn't want to challenge the dynamic, he admitted. I liked being the favorite. James handed me nothing but a suggestion. Check your email. Subject line, I'm sorry. Body, I saw everything on the USB. I was wrong. Can we talk when you're ready? I didn't reply. I booked a flight to Singapore to consult on a green renovation project. 3 days into the trip. A news alert. Carter Industries announces Green Architecture Division. My phone rang. Thomas. He's brought in sustainability consultants. Solar retrofitting. Carbon neutrality plans. He keeps saying, she was right. When I returned to Chicago, a package from Dad waited. I let it sit for 2 days before opening it. Inside, blueprints. For a community center in Mom's hometown of Franklin, Ohio. His handwriting filled the margins. He'd clearly done research. A letter accompanied it. Elizabeth, the box you gave me was a reckoning. I failed you. I dismissed you. But I finally saw what I should have seen all along. Your mother was right. You built something remarkable without my support. The blueprints are for a center in Franklin to honor her legacy. Would you consider giving your professional input? Maybe even leading it. I'll understand if you can't. Respectfully, Dad. I read it 3 times. No manipulation. Just ... regret. After 2 days, I texted, coffee, Lakefront Caf. Wednesday 10 a.m. His reply came instantly, I'll be there. Richard Carter showed up on time. The suit remained, but he looked ... human, older, humbled. Elizabeth, he said, thank you. We talked about Franklin, Mom, and the center. He admitted watching the USB 17 times. Your Lakefront Commons project, that's legacy. That's what matters. When I asked what changed, he replied, your note. It reminded me of something your mother said years ago. That I was too focused on building an empire to see that you were building a better world. He confessed to breaking his promise to Mom, to support my dreams. He acknowledged his mistakes. Even said he was in therapy. Family therapy, I echoed in disbelief. Twice a week, he confirmed. He offered, lead the community center. Your vision, your terms, and if I say no, then I'll respect your decision. This isn't manipulation, Elizabeth. This is recognition. After a pause, I replied, I'll review the proposal. Professionally. That's all for now. Professional meetings turned into regular collaboration. He deferred to my expertise. For the first time, We worked together not as father and daughter, but as equals. 6 weeks later, I accepted a dinner invite to Thomas's home. Everyone was there. Conversation was awkward until Rebecca asked about my work. Before I could speak, Dad said, "Elizabeth's community center design is revolutionary." Thomas added, "He's taking night classes in environmental design." "It's important to get it right," Dad said. For once, they listened when I spoke. At the groundbreaking ceremony for the Margaret Carter Community Center, he turned to me. "Would you speak today? It should be you." I stepped to the podium. "This center isn't just a building, it's a foundation for people, for families. It tells a story of transformation, second chances, and the power of seeing potential where others don't." Applause. Pride in my father's eyes. Real pride. Later, he handed me a small package, my childhood dream house model cardboard, foil solar panels, green paper garden. "Your mother saved it," he said. "Said you had vision." As I held it, I realized something. The gift I gave him hadn't just forced him to see MIT, had transformed him. "Thank you," I said. "No," he replied. "Thank you for not giving up. Not on architecture. Not on yourself. Not even on me." As we stood together at the site, I realized we were no longer rebuilding a relationship. We were building something new. The Margaret Carter Community Center was no longer just a design project, it had become a shared vision, one that tethered generations together through bricks, solar panels, and purpose. Working with my father was not without its discomforts, but it carried an unexpected peace. He listened, he asked, he deferred to my judgment. For the first time in our shared history, we were collaborators. The media attention surrounding the groundbreaking had been greater than expected. My inbox overflowed with interview requests and invitations to keynote sustainability conferences. Carter Industries, once synonymous with industrial sprawl, had become the face of environmental transformation, and I, Elizabeth Carter, was now the woman who redesigned her father's empire and reminded him of his conscience. But healing was not linear. 2 weeks after the ceremony, I arrived at the project site to find one of the contractors hired through a board contact had altered the specifications without consulting me. Cheaper insulation, substandard solar panels, and an entirely different supplier for reclaimed wood. I confronted him immediately. "The decision came from above," he said. "Richard Carter approved it." My heart sank. That night, I showed up at my father's home, blueprints in hand. He opened the door and immediately stepped aside, wordlessly inviting me in. "Did you override my specs?" I demanded. He blinked. I asked the contractor to explore cost-saving options. "I didn't approve anything." "Well, he thinks you did." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll fix it." He made the call in front of me, fired the contractor, reinstated the original suppliers. And then he said something that stopped me cold. "I'm still learning, Elizabeth. But I know this, cutting corners on your vision isn't an option, not anymore." That winter, I began receiving holiday cards from former classmates, colleagues, and even a few distant relatives who had seen the news stories. But one card stood out. It arrived without a return address, postmarked from a small town in Oregon. Inside was a photograph of my mother, one I'd never seen before. She was in her 20s, standing in front of her childhood home in Franklin, holding a sketchbook and smiling. There was no note, just her handwriting on the back of the photo. "This is where it begins." I stared at it for a long time. Sophia was the first person I showed it to. "Do you think she sent it before she died and someone just found it? Or maybe someone close to her thought I needed it now?" I replied. Either way, it felt like a sign. In early spring, I traveled to Franklin again, this time alone. The community center's framing had begun, and the foundation was curing beneath the mild Ohio sun. As I walked through the skeleton of what would become classrooms, a library, and an art studio, I imagined my mother walking these same sidewalks, dreaming with that sketchbook in her hand. "Looks good," a familiar voice said. I turned to see Marcus, holding a hard hat in one hand and a coffee in the other. "I thought you had a firm opening in Atlanta this week." "Pushed it. Couldn't miss seeing this." He handed me the coffee and slid the hard hat onto my head. "You belong here, Liz. You always did." We stood together in the unfinished courtyard, watching the cranes lift steel beams into place. There was something healing in the sound of construction, the way it suggested growth, forward motion, permanence. "My dad's flying in next week," I said. "We're going to walk the full structure." Marcus nodded. "You ready for that?" "More than I thought I'd be." The walkthrough with my father was quieter than I anticipated. He didn't try to narrate or explain. Instead, he trailed me through each hallway, occasionally pausing to examine a beam or study a design detail. When we reached the central atrium, a glass-ceilinged gathering space filled with natural light, he stopped. "You know," he said, voice thick, "your mother described something like this in her journal. A place where sunlight could touch every corner." I hadn't known that, but it didn't surprise me. He looked around, blinking fast. "She'd be proud of you. Not just for this, for everything." I turned toward him, heart pounding. "I didn't do this for pride, Dad, not anymore." He nodded. "I know. You did it because it was right." It was the first time he'd acknowledged the values behind my work, not just the results. We continued the tour, this time side by side. Weeks later, I was back in Chicago reviewing plans for a new waterfront sustainability project when an envelope arrived by courier. Inside was a DI transferring ownership of a plot of land adjacent to the community center to a nonprofit foundation in my name. Accompanying it was a single line written in my father's bold handwriting. "Every builder needs space to dream." He had given me the freedom to shape something entirely my own. And for the first time in my life, it felt like a gift, not a test. Spring turned to summer, and with it came the final phases of construction at the Margaret Carter Community Center. By late July, the building stood tall, steel and glass interlaced with warm reclaimed wood. The rooftop garden lush with pollinator-friendly plants, and solar panels angled perfectly to catch the Midwest sun. The interior buzzed with finishing touches, murals going up, bookshelves being stocked, community volunteers painting trim and installing fixtures. I spent my days overseeing it all. But my nights were quieter, more reflective. Marcus and I had taken some spaces. Moved to Atlanta was ultimately necessary for his career, and I needed to stay grounded in Franklin through the center's launch. Our love hadn't ended, but we both understood something unspoken. Reconciliation and rebuilding required solitude as much as companionship. On a humid August morning, a week before the grand opening, I received an invitation, a private dinner at my father's home, handwritten, no email, no text. That evening, I arrived at the old Carter estate and was surprised to find not just my father, but James, Thomas, and their families. The dining room had been transformed not into the cold, formal space of my childhood, but something warmer. Candles flickered. My mother's old china was set on the table. Photographs of her lined the sideboard. My father stood as I entered. "This isn't about business," he said. "It's about family." Dinner was filled with laughter. Even awkward moments felt authentic. Thomas shared stories about his kids' misadventures in school. James spoke about Vanessa's nonprofit and how they'd recently partnered with a women's shelter. My father listened more than he spoke. When dessert was served, a blueberry cobbler, my mother's favorite, he raised a glass. "To Margaret," he said, "and to Elizabeth, for bringing us back to the table." The toast caught in my throat. I nodded, lifting my glass. The clink of crystal felt like a beginning. Opening day arrived under a bright September sky. Hundreds of people filled the courtyard. Children chased each other across the fresh-cut lawn, while reporters gathered near the podium. I wore a navy suit, not for armor this time, but for legacy. The same shade as the ribbon on the box I once handed my father. When I stepped up to the microphone, the crowd fell silent. "Welcome to the Margaret Carter Community Center," I began. "This isn't just a building, it's a promise. A promise that every person deserves space to grow, to learn, to create. That our past doesn't have to define our future." I spoke about my mother's vision, my team's hard work, and the community's resilience. But most of all, I spoke about change. This place was born from reckoning and rebuilt through love. Not perfect love, but honest love. The kind that sees you. The kind that grows. Applause echoed through the trees. Afterward, as guests toured the building, I found my father standing in the library, fingers brushing the spines of books my mother once read. He turned, emotion softening the lines in his face. "There's someone here you should meet," he said. Motioning toward the entrance, an elderly woman stepped forward, thin, elegant, and familiar. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm your mother's cousin. I sent you the photo." The world slowed. I took her hands. "Why now?" "Because she asked me to. She told me, if Richard ever saw you for who you truly are, I'd know." And when the news broke about the center, I knew. We embraced. Years of silence dissolved in that hug. Months passed. The community center thrived, hosting GED classes, art therapy sessions, youth coding programs. I commuted between Franklin and Chicago, splitting my time between private clients and public service. Balance I had never thought possible was now my reality. On New Year's Eve, a small ceremony took place on the center's rooftop garden. A plaque was unveiled, in honor of Margaret Carter, who believed that vision begins at home. Designed by Elizabeth Carter, who proved it. My father placed a single rose beside the plaque. Then, he turned to me, eyes glistening. "I used to think legacy was about names etched on buildings," he said, "but it's about the people those buildings serve. You taught me that." Fireworks exploded in the distance. The new year began. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was simply building.